Welcome back to the channel. In this one, we're going to look at some truly surreal and disturbing Aussie cases that happened as recently as 2018. Now, no doubt some of you would have heard some of these stories before, so let me know in the comments below if you reckon I should have included anything, didn't get right, or your thoughts and theories. So we're going to start off with phantom social workers. In Caraba near Queanbeyan in New South Wales, on February 11, 2018, a woman whose identity has been concealed was visited by two caseworkers from the Department of Family and Community Service, or what they call FACS. They were sent by the department to do a welfare check on the woman's two babies and provided the necessary ID to verify themselves to the woman. This fact becomes important later. So the woman was extremely concerned, feeling that someone dobbed her in for not providing the adequate care for her children, but both the children were sleeping at the time of the visit, so she asked the two if she could call them when they're up. I'd imagine it's a pretty big deal when the Department of Children's Services come knocking at your door. So she wanted to understandably cooperate fully with the caseworkers. So true to her word, when the kids were awake some time later, she called the caseworkers back on the number they left with her previously, and they came back over. They came inside the house and saw that the children who were sitting in the lounge room looked okay and were in good health. They then asked to inspect the children's bedroom, and after inspecting it, they were happy and left the house. The woman was left devastated though, and after she had time to process the whole ordeal, she decided to call FACS and find out where the allegation came from. But when she called them, they were unsure why she was calling. They had no record of any of their employees visiting her. That's when the woman immediately called the police. The reason she let the FACS workers into a house is because the ID that they provided was eerily similar to what a legitimate FACS card looked like, minus the photos on the card which FACS identifications have. As of this May 2024, these two phantom social workers still haven't been found. The term phantom social workers has been coined to describe people posing as social workers and abducting children from their parents over the years, most notably in the US and in the UK. On April 18, 2015, the remains of Travis Mills was found in the back of his car, which had been abandoned in the Perth suburb of Hilbert, and set alight. Prior to the tragic event, Travis was at home in the neighbouring suburb of Seville Grove, where he was building a trampoline for his daughter Ruby, who was about to have her first birthday on April 19th. Travis had broken up with his partner and Ruby's mother, Selena Ruthsales, and sometime after Ruby was born, they had shared custody of her. But Selena's mother, Joanne, was a known drug dealer in the Armidale area. He cautioned Selena about visiting her mother because he didn't want Ruby in the way of danger. Understandably, Travis and Selena had argued about this a fair bit, and Travis warned that he'd be seeking full custody if she continued taking Ruby over to Joanne's place. So worried that Travis would get full custody of Ruby, Selena and her mother planned to do the unthinkable. So they rallied three of their friends, Daryl Newton and Darren and Justine Campbell, to go with them over to Travis's house in Seville Grove on Good Friday, April 18th, which was the Easter long weekend. In what was described as an unprovoked attack, Travis answered the door to Selena but was quickly ambushed by Daryl and Darren. Darren was armed with a baseball bat. In the scuffle, according to Justine, Travis defended himself with a knife and stabbed Darren in the leg. This apparently caused Darren to go ballistic and start bashing Travis relentlessly with the baseball bat that he brought. Travis was then put into the back of his Ford Falcon sedan, and the group drove his car out to nearby Hilbert and a new housing estate which was yet to have any houses built on the properties. While Travis was still alive, the group torched his car, causing Travis to pass in one of the most gruesome ways imaginable. Travis's car was discovered a short time later, and pretty quickly, authorities identified Selena and Joanne as the primary suspects. That led the authorities to find the other three. Selena was sentenced to life in jail with a minimum of 21 years. Joanne, Daryl and Darren were sentenced to at least 24 years each, and Justine was sentenced to at least 13 years. While a lot of ass covering was said by each one of them, Justine told authorities that Joanne was driven by hatred and anger when she coordinated Travis's demise. Alright, you guys know how much I love my cults. In July 2007, internet cult leader Simon Cadwell, his partner Chantel McDougall, their 5-year-old daughter Leela, and their friend Antonio Popich vanished from the rural southwest WA town of Nannup, about 270 k's away from Perth. I'm going to refer to them in the past tense for this video, as they've been missing for almost 17 years now. So Simon was the founder of Servers of the Divine Plan, which was an online-based cult. He called himself Psy to his followers, and members were known as Servers. They had about 40 followers. He also published a book with Doomsday themes called The New Call, which at one point could be bought for a bargain 360 Australian dollars. The Divine Plan believed that Earth was heading to the end of a 75,000-year-old cycle and a new world would be born. At home, Antonio and Chantel had been brainwashed and were subservient to Simon. He was known to be really controlling and was on some heavy antipsychotic medication, among other things, but, So prior to their disappearance, Simon told one of his followers in the forum where his online cult communicated that he was planning a peaceful family suicide pact. But after speaking with the follower, she confronted him with the realization of him ending his daughter's life. It was because of this that Simon changed his mind and decided that he and his family would instead move to an isolated area where they couldn't be reached. So Simon and Chantel told friends and family that they were moving to Brazil, to the outskirts of Rio Branco, a town in the Amazon rainforest that's home to syncretic religious cults, because they felt they didn't belong in modern society. So on the July 13th of that 2007, Chantel sold her car to a dealership in the town of Busselton for about $4,000, which we know for sure because there's a paper record of it, but apparently Simon had sold his privately for about $1,500. They were also selling the Dachshunds, both of which they sold on July 14th. This was the last time Chantel was seen alive. Simon and Chantel's landlords attended their property a couple of days later for the scheduled property inspection. That's when they found nobody home, but signs as if no one had left. Things like wallets and credit cards were still there, food was in the fridge, and dirty dishes were still left in the sink and table. But the landlords did discover 2 notes left behind, and both said they'd gone to Brazil. Authorities later determined that one of the notes was in Simon's handwriting, and the other note was in Antonio's. What's weird is authorities confirmed that they had not travelled overseas on their passports, and their bank accounts remained untouched. The money from Chantel selling a car and the 2 dogs, which was a significant amount, was still in her account. Police had no idea where to start, so they went through everything with a fine-tooth comb. That's when they discovered a call that they made to Trans WA, the state train company, on July 12th to book a bus ticket from Bridgetown, which is south of WA, to Northcliffe under the name J. Roberts. But when they checked the ticket, it had never been used. But 2 train tickets were also booked under J. Roberts, which were redeemed on the morning of July 16th, one going from East Perth to Kalgoorlie, which is inland from Perth, and the other from Perth to Northcliffe. The last investigated lead was that Simon had stayed in a Northbridge Backpackers, which is a Perth inner city suburb, before catching a train to Kalgoorlie on the night of July 15th. Police also managed to trace Antonio's mobile. It was used to call at Backpackers to make a reservation, as well as a Domino's Pizza nearby, and the gay bar The Court, which is also in Northbridge, which I think is all in that same part of Northbridge there on William Street. So the Domino's pizza delivery driver confirmed that he delivered a pizza to a man matching Antonio's description, but in Kings Park. Kings Park is on the other side of the city, opposite from Northbridge, so to me it seems a little bit odd to go there because it's mainly just, if anyone knows Kings Park, it's like a botanic garden and, views of the city and all that sort of stuff. And I guess if you're coming all the way from, outside of Perth to see it, maybe it's a bit of a hot spot to visit. But it's what the delivery driver confirmed. Because Antonio was gay, him calling the court also helped verify that it was indeed Antonio's phone calls and that he was in Perth. On July 16th, his phone was used to call Trans WA. This was the last time Antonio was assumed to be alive. So sometime in October, prison workers who were working alongside bushland in Northcliffe reported finding a woman's t-shirt smelling of dead flesh. However, the report was not fully investigated until 2015. That's 8 years later, and by then, a massive bushfire had swept through the area. During the police's investigation into the family and Antonio's disappearances, they discovered that Simon had stolen his identity from a former colleague back in the UK, and that his real name was Gary Felton. In February 2011, someone by the name of Gary Felton checked into a caravan park in King River near Albany on the south coast of WA. Police attempted to locate every Gary Felton in the country, but none of the men they found had ever stayed in King River. So the money from the car and the dogs that Chantel sold still sits untouched in a bank account. There's no proof that they left the country. Their bodies have never been found, and there's no proof they're dead. There's also no proof they're alive. One possible theory is that they were on board the TAM Airlines flight 3054 on July 17th, which was a Brazilian flight departing from Porto Alegre to Sao Paulo, but it shortly crashed into a Shell petrol station, causing all 187 people on board to lose their lives, as well as 12 people on the ground. If you recall, Brazil is where they were meant to be headed, and the Porto Alegre to Sao Paulo leg is one of the ways to get to Rio Branco. So in a place where stuff like cults and people going missing without a trace is the stuff of Hollywood movies, the mystery surrounding this case only seems to deepen the more it's investigated. Did the family move to Brazil under false identities? Are they living off the grid at an isolated location, or did they take their own lives? Look, the most optimistic conclusion is that Simon's proven ability to falsify his identity is already a strong indicator that the four of them could be living somewhere else under false names. They could literally live anywhere in Australia and probably never be found. They could be living in Brazil, but it's safe to say that we'll probably never know. On July 2nd, 2016, a local fisherman in East Fremantle sees a blue suitcase floating in the Swan River by the Fremantle traffic bridge and decides to pull it up onto his boat. When he opens it up, he makes a grim discovery. A human body stuffed inside, as well as some tiles used to weigh the suitcase down in the water. The victim was a woman. She was half naked and appeared to have suffered significant injuries. During the investigation, police discovered tiles near the bridge matching the ones inside the suitcase, leading them to suspect it's where the body had been dumped. Unfortunately, police didn't have an identity for the body, so they launched an extensive media campaign, hoping someone from the public would recognise her. So just take note that this happened in Perth, WA in 2016. That's very recent and very close to where I live. I still remember it like it was yesterday. Things like this don't happen very often. So reconstructions were made of the victim to try and get the media to identify her, listing her as a woman of Asian descent, between 35 to 45 years old, and approximately 158 centimeters tall and weighing at about 59 kilos. Despite this, the state of the victim's body made it hard to be sure. Then almost 2 months later, on August 28th, 57-year-old Annabelle Chen was reported missing by her daughter. Tiffany Wan, a student of Melbourne University, had travelled to Perth after she was unable to contact her mum. This missing Annabelle turned out to be the body in the suitcase. Annabelle was last seen on June 30th by Tiffany, just a few days prior to being discovered. Annabelle and Tiffany migrated from Singapore and moved to Perth in 1999, where they settled in the wealthy suburb of Mosman Park. Annabelle was a talented artist from a wealthy family and was recently divorced from her husband, Ping Ban. It was a pretty bad divorce, so Annabelle was opposed to Tiffany having any contact with her father and her two half-sisters. Prior to Annabelle's death, Tiffany was due to graduate from university on August 4th and wanted her father and two sisters to be at the ceremony too. This of course upset Annabelle, and the two got into a big argument about it. So Tiffany, her dad, and her two sisters met up in Melbourne for the ceremony, where she graduated with a master's degree in urban planning. But Annabelle wasn't present. People close to Tiffany claimed that she was in good spirits despite this. While Annabelle didn't want to be present at the ceremony, she had supposedly promised a large sum of money to Tiffany for graduating. So during the police investigation, Tiffany and Ban were considered the primary suspects. Police took statements from them both. And completely coincidentally, they both told the same story. The last time they'd seen Annabelle alive was on June 30th. After they were discussing the graduation, Annabelle allegedly walked out of her own house carrying a suitcase and was driven away in a white car by a man of Asian appearance. They also both claimed that Annabelle later sent Tiffany a text saying that she wouldn't be attending the graduation because she decided on a whim to tour around Australia with a friend before going to Switzerland for a treatment for brain calcification, which is a very serious condition and oddly spontaneous that Annabelle wanted to go out of country suddenly to go get it treated, when there is no medical cure for it. As you can imagine, evidence was stacking up against the two, and police ended up charging both Tiffany and Ban for Annabelle's passing. That's when father and daughter turned against each other. According to Tiffany, her dad Ban had come to Perth from Singapore to help her talk to Annabelle about the graduation. Ban and Annabelle went upstairs while Tiffany remained downstairs, but she overheard arguments about money and the house. She then claimed to hear a metallic thud and gasping. Concerned, Tiffany asked what was going on, but Ban repeatedly told her not to come upstairs. It was at this point that Tiffany ran outside the house. There was a few more metallic thuds, and then a few moments later, Ben came outside the house to talk to Tiffany. After much hesitation, he told her that Annabelle had come at him with a large iron paperweight, and for reference it's shaped like an ancient Chinese coin. She had apparently struck him with it. Then Annabelle tried to hit him again, but Ban grabbed the paperweight and fatally struck Annabelle. Because that's what you do when you disarm someone. While there were no signs that Ban had been struck, he continuously maintained that the whole thing was accidental. Tiffany, on the other hand, apparently refused to believe that it was, but couldn't bear to call the police on her own father. In Ban's version, he claimed that he was in Singapore at the time and that Tiffany had called him to let him know Annabelle was dead. 2 days earlier, Annabelle and Tiffany had gotten into an argument where Annabelle apparently snapped and threw things at Tiffany, including this paperweight. Tiffany threw it back and struck Annabelle, who was still alive at the time. Tiffany stopped and went to her aid, but Annabelle told her to get out of the room. The next morning, having not seen her mother leave her room, Tiffany went in to check on her and discovered that Annabelle was lying dead on her bed. Panicked, Tiffany stored Annabelle's body in the recycle bin, again because that's what you do. Ban claimed he couldn't call the police on his own daughter after hearing about what had happened to Annabelle, but he agreed to help her with Annabelle's body when she asked him to. When he got to Perth, they both removed Annabelle's body from the bin, put it in a suitcase, and drove to the Fremantle traffic bridge later the same night. Ban said they used a scooter with a board tied to it to move the suitcase from the car, saying it was heavy because Tiffany had weighed it down with tiles. They submerged the suitcase into the Swan River along with the scooter before returning back to Annabelle's home and going to sleep. Ban flew back to Singapore the next day and, despite not asking for it, was transferred $11,000 by Tiffany. Police determined that Ban had the motive and the strength to end Annabelle's life. He was apparently bankrupt and needed money. After striking Annabelle with a paperweight, he stuffed her body in a suitcase, made the scooter with the chopping board strapped to it, and submerged the body into the Swan River. Whether Tiffany was present can't be confirmed. Meanwhile, Tiffany covered up the footprints at the house and washed Ban's clothes when he got back to the house. The intent was to inherit Annabelle's estate. The pair devised a story to make it seem as if Annabelle had vanished, hoping to build up enough time between the murder and the missing persons report in an attempt to try and murky the waters a bit. Tiffany also continued sending text messages to her mother even though she knew she was dead. Ban was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. At no point during his sentencing did Ban show any remorse towards Annabelle's demise. Tiffany was found guilty of being an accessory to murder and sentenced to 4 years and 10 months in prison. She only served 3 and was released in April of 2020. That's right, she's out now. Thankfully, she hasn't inherited any of her mum's fortune. So like I said at the start of the video, If there's anything I missed or should have included, please feel free to share it in the comments below, along with your thoughts and theories. If you wouldn't mind, please give the video a like if you did like it, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this.